fluorescent office light illuminated my workspace, but to me, everything seemed shrouded in gloom. It was late, and while the rest of the team had already left, I remained in front of my computer screen, typing incessantly. The sound of the keyboard was the only echo that filled the silent environment. I looked at the clock and realized it was already past 10 at night. James, my boss, was at a lavish dinner with his wife, Vanessa, and I wondered if, just for a moment, he was thinking about me, about the invisible assistant who was always there, ready to help but who never got a word. Look of recognition. I shouldn't be here, I muttered to myself, as I closed a report that had cost me hours of work. The truth is, I had ideas that could transform the company, but every time I tried to share them, James just ignored me. He was so immersed in his own arrogance that he didn't realize the potential he had at my side. That night, as I left the office, I saw through the restaurant window that James and Vanessa were laughing and clinking glasses of wine. The shine of the luxurious decoration and the joy they exuded left a bitter taste in my mouth. One day, I'm going to be more than an assistant, I thought, feeling the frustration rising inside me. I'm going to be the person who makes things happen. The next morning, a meeting was scheduled to discuss the company's performance. I was anxious because I had a plan in mind, something that could change the trajectory we were following. Once everyone was settled, James began to speak, his voice full of assurance. He was so convinced he was on the right path that he barely noticed the discouraging numbers I had analyzed. After a few minutes, I finally managed to intervene. James, I have a proposal that could improve our results, I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. He turned to me with a look that mixed disdain and surprise. Anna, you are always so creative. But let's be real, what could you suggest that hasn't already been tried before? He scoffed, causing a few chuckles to echo around the room. I studied market trends and I think we could. I tried to continue, but he interrupted me again. This is not the time for your wild ideas. We need real solutions. Let's move on, he said, and the meeting continued, leaving me with a knot in my stomach. I felt humiliation burning across my face. While the others discussed strategies that I knew wouldn't work, I got lost in thought. The frustration grew. I wanted to scream. I wanted them to see what I saw. I promised myself right then and there that I wouldn't give up. One day they would recognize my worth. One day I would make a difference. I left the room feeling like every second spent as an assistant was turning into determination. The ideas that simmered in my mind could not be ignored forever. There was a path I could follow, a way to show that I was more than just an invisible assistant. With that decision firmly in my heart, I returned to my office. It was time to start working on a plan that would make them realize that I was capable, that I could be the change the company needed. And from that moment on, there would be no more room for doubt. The atmosphere at the company was tense, and I could feel the pressure in the air. The numbers, which were once a source of pride, were now alarming. The boardroom, which used to be a place where I could share ideas and innovations, turned into a stage for disdain and criticism. James, my arrogant boss, seemed increasingly distant and reluctant to listen to any suggestions, especially mine. Anna, that doesn't make sense. We need concrete actions, not conspiracy theories, he said, with a mocking tone that still echoed in my mind. Meanwhile, Vanessa, his wife, continued to live in her ostentatious world, oblivious to what was happening in the office. At a recent event, she had bragged about her travels and parties, while I struggled to keep the company afloat. Looking from afar, I realized that the brilliance of his world was just an illusion. I knew that if nothing changed, the company wouldn't last much longer. It was time to act. That night, as most of the employees said their goodbyes, I remained in the room, surrounded by graphs and numbers. The hours passed and the light from the computer screen illuminated my face, reflecting the determination that was growing in me. I needed to find a solution. I began compiling the information I had collected, analyzing financial reports and market trends. With each piece of data he examined, an idea began to take shape. If James doesn't want to hear it, then I'll do it myself, I muttered to myself. The strategic plan he was developing could be the company's salvation. So, even without James' approval, I began developing an outline that included new approaches to marketing and process optimization. I knew I would need to be careful, but the idea of seeing the company prosper was stronger than any fear. Over the next few days, I worked in secret. Every detail was meticulously planned. After weeks of research, I was finally ready to present my proposal to James. I invited him to a meeting, trying to hide the anxiety that was pulsing in my chest. "James, I really think you should see this. We have to change our approach to save the company," he said, trying to convey confidence. He entered the room, and the look he gave me was one of contempt. "Again, Anna, don't you understand that this is not your place? These ideas of yours..." He began, but I didn't let him finish. "James, please just listen. The data speaks for itself. We need a reformulation, or we will be in serious trouble," I replied, trying to remain calm, but my voice betrayed the accumulated frustration. He began to analyze my plan, and within minutes, the sarcastic smile I knew well appeared on his face. "Anna, this is laughable. Do you really think this will work?" As if we had time to play around with crazy theories. The room was filled with laughter, and I felt exposed and ridiculed. But instead of letting myself get discouraged, a flame of determination lit up inside me. "If you don't want to hear it, then I'll do it myself," I replied, almost without thinking. That statement took everyone by surprise, and, for a moment, silence took over the room. "I will act, and you will see that I am right. I'm not going to give up," I added, looking at him. I left the room with my heart racing, but with a feeling of freedom. I began secretly implementing my ideas, using the extra hours to work on strategies that could turn the company around. Over the weeks, I became more and more involved, talking to colleagues, gathering feedback, and adjusting my plan. It was a struggle, but the feeling of being in control was overwhelming. One night, while reviewing some presentations, I was interrupted by a message from one of the employees. "Anna, you are doing a great job. People are starting to notice the changes," he said, and I smiled, even though I knew there was still a long way to go. With each small success, I felt like I was getting closer to carving out my space and showing everyone, especially James, that I was more than an invisible assistant. I was a force to be reckoned with, and no matter how difficult it was, I was determined to fight for the company and for myself. The sound of the phone echoed through the room, breaking the silence I had cultivated for weeks. I looked at the screen and saw the name that, before, caused me a mixture of fear and respect. James, the man who, for so long, had been my boss and, at many times, my oppressor. I took a deep breath, trying to muster the courage I needed to answer. "Anna." His voice sounded from the other side, with an almost childish curiosity. "Have you seen this month's sales figures?" "Yes, James," I replied, remaining calm. The increase was significant, a reflection of what I implemented in recent weeks. "I don't understand how this happened." He looked confused, like he was trying to solve a mystery. "I would not approve of these changes." "Yes, James, you didn't approve, but the results speak for themselves." I couldn't avoid a slight irony in my voice. The ideas worked. There was immense satisfaction in seeing his disbelief. James had always been the kind of man who wouldn't take no for an answer, but now his cards were on the table. The company was getting back on its feet, and I had done it without their support. "You're appropriating my work, Anna," he snapped, his voice filled with repressed anger. "Don't forget who's the boss here." "James, I didn't appropriate anything," I replied, remaining firm. "I just did what was necessary to save the company. If you had listened to my suggestions from the beginning, we might not be in this situation." He took a deep breath, and I could hear the silence that followed. I knew I was touching a raw nerve. James had never been good at dealing with criticism, especially when it came from someone he considered inferior. "I don't like your tone, Anna," he said, trying to regain control of the situation. "You must remember your place." "My place?" I laughed, a laugh that sounded more like release than mockery. "My place is here, leading. And if you can't or don't want to see that, then it's not my problem." The tension was palpable, and I felt the power changing hands. It was as if the room had compacted around us, and I was finally breathing the air that had previously been denied me. James had always been the imposing one, the unshakable one. Now he stood before me, a man who didn't know how to deal with change. "You may feel in control now, but that won't last," he said, trying to assert himself. "I'm still the CEO of this company." "And for how long?" I asked, challenging him. "I believe that if you continue to ignore what is happening, soon there will be no more room for you here." He was silent, and I realized that maybe I was starting to inspire a little fear in him. The irony of this was not lost on me. The man who had always made me feel small was now feeling threatened by me. It was a twist I had dreamed of for years. "You can have your results, but they mean nothing without my approval," he fired, trying to assert himself again. "And you can continue to cling to your pride, James. But the truth is that I don't need your approval to do what's right," I said, now calmer, but firm in my position. "The company needs leadership that works, and I am that person." The call ended with a heavy silence, and I put the phone aside, feeling a mix of relief and satisfaction. The battle was far from won, but I had taken an important step. While the adrenaline was still coursing through my veins, I couldn't help but think that maybe, finally, I was starting to become the woman I always wanted to be, the protagonist of my own story, and, most importantly, the CEO this company really needed. The environment at the company was in a new phase, and Anna, finally occupied the position of director. The feeling of achievement was indescribable, but the reality of having James as my direct superior still hung like a heavy cloud over me. He didn't accept the change, and his contempt for me only seemed to grow. During meetings, his hostility manifested itself in cutting looks and sarcastic comments that, even if I tried to ignore it, hit me like a punch in the gut. It was at one of these meetings that everything intensified. The room was full of my colleagues, and the tension was palpable. James was about to present a new project, although in reality it was a distorted version of my ideas. I knew he was trying to appropriate my work. When he started to speak, his words were like poison. "This project, as you all know, is an initiative that I developed to boost our sales. Of course, some of Anna's suggestions were considered. But, as always, I am the one who will lead this endeavor," James said, with a smile arrogant. I felt the blood boil in my veins. What he was doing was a clear attempt to belittle me. I raised my hand, interrupting him. "James, with all due respect, the foundation of this project was built from the research and analysis I've carried out over the past few months. If you really want the team to commit, perhaps it's time to recognize everyone's work." The room fell silent, and eyes turned to James. He was visibly angry, but made sure to maintain his composure. "Anna, your contribution is welcome, but we cannot forget that leadership is a matter of experience and vision. You still have a lot to learn." After the meeting, I was approached by some colleagues who expressed their support. "Anna, you were incredible. Don't let him discourage you," said Carla, one of the assistants. "We all know how much you dedicated yourself." While I treasured her words, my mind was occupied with the certainty that James wouldn't give up so easily. What I didn't expect was Vanessa's appearance at the company gala the following week. She looked stunning in a red dress, but there was something in her gaze that made me feel uncomfortable. "Anna, it's good to see you here," she said, approaching with a smile that didn't seem entirely genuine. "I wanted to talk a little. I've heard great things about you and your new position." "Hi, Vanessa," I replied, remaining friendly. "What would you like to discuss?" She hesitated for a moment, as if choosing her words carefully. "I know things between you and James aren't easy. He can be difficult. But I wanted you to know that regardless of what's happened in the past, I'm here if you need someone to talk to." I was skeptical. "Vanessa, you and James have a long and complicated history. I feel like you're on his side, not mine." "It's not that. I'm trying to be friends," she insisted, a flash of desperation in her eyes. "James is not the same person I knew. He has changed, and not for the better." "I'm not sure I can believe you, Vanessa," I replied, standing my ground. "You were always there for him, even when he looked down on me." "I know. But I'm not the CEO's wife anymore. I'm trying to understand where it all went wrong, she said, with a vulnerable tone that took me by surprise. The conversation was interrupted by James, who approached with a fake smile. "Ah, it's good to see you two together. I hope you're having a productive conversation," he said, his voice thick with sarcasm. "Vanessa, don't forget we're at a business event, not a book club." The tension grew, and I knew I needed to get out of the situation before James could manipulate the environment further. "I'll get a drink," I muttered and walked away. As he walked, his mind was buzzing with thoughts. Vanessa could be an ally, but I wasn't sure I could trust her. The power game was changing, but the rules were still being written, and I was determined not to let James get me down again. The courtroom was packed, and the tension in the air was palpable. I never imagined that I would have to fight for my place in an environment that, for so long, felt oppressive. Now here I was, surrounded by lawyers, witnesses, and a team that had finally recognized my worth. The judge called the case to order, and I took a deep breath, feeling a knot form in my stomach. It was my chance to show that I wasn't just the invisible assistant I was before. James' lawyer, a man in an impeccable suit, began speaking, his voice firm and authoritative. "Ladies and gentlemen, Anna's dismissal was not just a business decision, but a necessity given the inefficiency of her management." He looked at me with a sneer, as if he was amused by my misfortune. What he didn't know was that I had prepared myself for this moment. "Your Excellency," I said, standing up with the calm I didn't feel inside, "I am grateful for the opportunity to defend myself. What happened at the company was not my failure, but rather a reflection of my former boss's lack of leadership and vision." My words echoed in the room, and I could tell people were paying attention. The judge watched me with a neutral look, but his curiosity was evident. "Are you claiming that James is to blame for the company's downfall?" asked James' lawyer, trying to put me on the defensive. I smiled. "I'm not saying that. I'm just stating the facts." While I worked behind the scenes, James was more concerned about maintaining his image than actually taking care of the company. I was only able to implement significant changes when he decided to fire me, because he couldn't deal with the truth. I was the only one who knew how to save the company. The room was silent, and I could feel the approval of some of the team members who were present. They knew I was telling the truth. James' lawyer, realizing his strategy wasn't working, changed tactics. "You weren't just an assistant, Anna. You didn't have the necessary training to lead a company." "Actually," I replied, my voice firm, "I have a degree in administration and have more than 5 years of experience in practice." Meanwhile, James failed to realize what was happening to the company because he was focused on his image. The lawyer hesitated, and I took the opportunity to continue. The dismissal was an attempt to divert responsibility and prevent me from taking the lead in the company's recovery. The judge looked at me with an expression of interest. "Do you have evidence to support your claims?" With a gesture, I took out a flash drive that was in my bag. "Yes, Your Excellency. I have compiled reports and emails that clearly demonstrate James' negligence and the actions I took to try to save the company." A murmur went through the room, and I felt a rush of adrenaline rush through me. It was the decisive moment. James was visibly nervous now, his arrogant expression having dissipated. "This is just an attempt to tarnish my name," he shouted. But the confidence he once had was crumbling. "Anna doesn't have what it takes to be CEO. If it hadn't, why did you fire me?" I retorted with a challenging smile. "Because you knew I was a threat to your position. The truth is, while you were distracted by your appearances, I was working for the future of the company." After long hours of arguments, the judge finally retired to deliberate. The room was silent, and I allowed myself a moment to breathe. I looked at the team supporting me, and a wave of gratitude washed over me. They believed in me when no one else did. When the judge returned and announced the decision, my heart almost stopped. Anna's dismissal was considered unfair. She will be reinstated to her position with all due rights and benefits. A scream of joy came from me, and the room erupted in applause. The victory was not just mine, but that of everyone who was by my side. As I walked out of the courtroom, A sense of freedom and power filled me. I was the CEO now, and James was out. The journey had been long and full of challenges, but I could finally start to shape the company's future in the way I always dreamed of. The battle was won, but I knew there was still a long way to go. And with the team by my side, I was ready to face any challenge that came my way. The day Vanessa looked for me was one of the most surreal of my life. I was in my office, surrounded by graphs and reports showing the exponential growth of the company under my management, when I received an unexpected message. "Anna, I need you. Can we meet?" The sentence, simple and direct, made me feel a mixture of surprise and apprehension. What could drive James's ex-wife, the woman who had always lived in luxury, to seek my help? I decided to respond, and we arranged a meeting for that afternoon at a cafe close to the company's headquarters. As soon as I entered the place, I saw Vanessa sitting at a table in the corner, with her head down, her blonde hair falling over her shoulders. The glow that previously dominated his eyes seemed to have faded. I sat down in front of her, and she looked up, revealing a tired and vulnerable face. "Anna," she began, her voice shaking, "thank you for coming. I didn't know who to turn to." "Vanessa, what happened? You looked so good." The word "good" sounded empty in my mouth, but I needed to understand. She sighed, as if the weight of the world was on her shoulders. "After the divorce, everything fell apart. James stepped away, and I didn't realize how involved he was in the company's finances. Now I'm on the verge of bankruptcy. I need help, and you're the only one who can help me." I watched her in silence. I remember all the times she ignored me, her ostentatious life, and the contempt she always showed for me. But somehow, in that weakness, there was a fragility that made me hesitate. "What exactly do you need, Vanessa?" She hesitated, her eyes watering. "I need a job, Anna. Something that allows me to start over. I know that you have become the CEO and that you are now in control. Please help me." Hearing those words, a wave of empathy hit me, but also a suppressed anger for all the times I was undeserved. "You know, I can't just give you a job. It needs to be earned." "I understand," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm willing to work hard. I don't know where to start." The cafe was full, but everything around us seemed distant. The smell of fresh coffee and the murmur of customers became a backdrop for the most important conversation of my life. "Maybe I can help you get back on your feet, but you'll have to be honest with me about everything that happened." Vanessa nodded, and over the next few minutes, she revealed details about how James had embezzled funds from the company over the past few years. Her words crashed over me like a storm, and I felt like I was connecting pieces of a puzzle I didn't even know I was putting together. "Do you have proof of this?" I asked, a ray of hope emerging amidst the chaos. I have some documents, emails. They are stored in my apartment. "But Anna, this could be dangerous. If James finds out, he won't hesitate to do something to me." A heavy silence hung between us. I knew this information could be the key to exposing James and restoring the integrity of the company. "Vanessa, if you help me gather this evidence, we can not only clear your name, but also bring justice. And maybe, just maybe, I might consider offering you a position here." She looked at me, a gleam of determination beginning to appear in her eyes. "You're right. I can no longer live in the shadow of what James did. I'm ready to fight." At that moment, I realized there was more at stake than revenge. This was Vanessa's chance to redeem herself and me, to show that true power comes from getting back up after a fall. What might have seemed like an unlikely alliance turned into a path to redemption, not just for Vanessa, but for me as well. The cafe started to empty, and I knew we had a mission ahead of us. "Let's do this," I declared, a smile starting to form on my face. "Together, we can rewrite our history."